Guild Wars 2 Conquest PvP can appear very simple at first. You stand in the circles and win, right? Well, it's not that simple because you often get players saying fight on point and others saying stop dying on node. The real answer is that it depends who stands on node and when they do so. I have an entire rotations and matchup series with many hours of content showing how to play, and if you're interested in a more in-depth look at PvP, check the links in the description. However, such a complicated web of topics can be difficult for a new player to understand because they don't know the order or the importance of each or what information carries over from the other. That is why in this video I will try to detail the 3 most important topics for improving your play in Guild Wars 2 PvP so that a beginner can learn the most basic but most important things to provide to their team. The number 1 thing you can do to provide to your team is to survive. Yes, standing on nodes is important to getting the capture point, but getting kills can get you potentially much more than a capture point. When you die, you not only relinquish the capture point to the enemy, but you're also in the down state for a good amount of time, on respawn for another 15 seconds, and then have to run back to the action. You're off the map from around 30 seconds to a minute every time you die. During that time, your teammates are outnumbered, and that means that they can die much more easily and lose their fights. Then, when they die, you'll be outnumbered. Many people will see that they keep dying because their teammates are dead, but the cause and effect relationship may have started much sooner than that due to the momentum of previous engagements. Maybe your team is dying because you left them first, and it creates a snowball effect if you don't regroup. So don't be a Darwin Award winner. Put your life and your team's life in your own hands and enter into every situation with the intent to survive it. Now I know it's easier said than done, so how do you reliably survive PvP situations? There are 2 main ideas, zoning and terrain. Zoning is understanding the relative risk of your positioning. If the enemy team has 4 in the fight and you have 3, then overextending is much more risky. If the enemy team has a sniper, soul beast, or dragon hunter, and you are without a lot of reflex, then standing out in the open where there aren't many things to hide behind is dangerous. A lot of zoning depends on understanding how the situation changes. Is this spot safe to stand at? Well, it might be right now, but the situation is constantly changing and it may no longer be safe to stand there. This is why mobility is one of the most important things to have. Yes, having condition cleanses, healing, and stun breaks are all important, but mobility and knowing when to disengage is the number 1 thing that will help you survive. You can also get out of danger by understanding what types of abilities you're going against. If it's projectiles, you want to stand behind line of sight. If it's melee attacks, you want to go up and down terrain. If it's classes with ports, you want to stand in spots that players can't teleport. And you can't use terrain if you're standing on the nodes. Become familiar with the terrain and use it when you're out of cooldowns or under pressure, and you'll greatly increase your survivability long enough for your team to flourish. Lastly, you want to use your 2 dodges intelligently. Not everyone knows every single animation of every class, and it can be hard to decide which animations you should dodge and which you shouldn't. Firstly, get a good dodge keybind to be able to react, and then be very mindful not to waste dodges. Many new players will dodge after getting hit, rather than before they get hit, or when they're moving very slowly, they dodge for mobility. Don't waste dodges for mobility. Use them to safely get out of bad situations. Dodge towards terrain so that when you're low on dodges, you can use movement to survive afterwards. And check out my matchups playlist if you want to see most of the animations of every class. Surviving is the highest priority, but if you play too safely, then your teammates will die and then you die. You need to balance playing safely with playing riskily. Builds with lots of CC or burst damage are a great presence for their team because their impact in a fight is instant. You want to play aggressively while you have cooldowns and kill potential, and play passively while you're pressured and low on cooldowns. Also, because the team that gets the first kill is at a big advantage, you want to make sure you don't spread your team's focus. In less organized fights like solo queue ranked, not every situation is obvious who should be the target. But if one person takes the initiative to use the call target keybind, then others can easily coordinate with that. Follow other targets, but also take the initiative to call a target if there isn't already. If you don't agree with the current target, it's still probably best to coordinate your attacks than to split your attacks. You don't have time in the middle of the match to argue the potential trade-offs of your decision. And since you know that dodges are important to survival, you know that enemies who just use their dodge are vulnerable. You can learn to count dodges just by remembering if someone dodged recently. If they dodged twice within the last 5 to 8 seconds, then it's usually a good time to throw all your damage on them. If you aren't sure, then pressure them with some of your less important attacks, rather than wasting your big burst into someone who may just dodge it. Obviously, every class has more than just dodges for defense, but this is a good start before you learn each matchup. Just like it isn't good to stand unknown to survive, it isn't good to lose focus on enemies who try to disengage. Because getting out of combat is a full reset, letting enemies disengage lets them re-engage shortly after. Don't waste all of the investment put into getting a kill by letting them disengage. Chase kills within reason, because if you do get that kill, it prevents them from creating issues elsewhere on the map for your team. When you're getting kills, you'll start winning fights. But if you're winning your fights and you still don't win the match, that's because Guild Wars 2 PvP is a conquest mode. And while kills are important, if you waste time or do it inefficiently, then your kills won't matter. Bleeding is one of the most important mechanics to understand. No, not the condition bleeding, but leaving enemies in down state and letting them bleed out while you cap the node you just won. After you get an enemy into the down state, you need to already know where you're going to go and what you're going to do. Are you going to finish it immediately to prevent the enemy reinforcements who are coming to revive? Are you going to bleed it because your team is leaving you to capture the node? Or are you going to quickly move on to the next objective and let your teammates deal with the enemy's bodies? This is where players lose the most time. They either stomp enemies too quickly, letting them respawn faster, and don't get value from their kills, or they hang around too long after fight is already decided. The most important thing to understand to get the most value out of your time spent is roles and rotations. Players over time have categorized types of builds that perform better in certain situations. Duelists are usually 1v1ers, roamers are usually playmakers, supports are usually in team fights keeping their team alive, and DPS just want to kill things. But these roles are not clearly defined, and there are priorities that change based on the exact situation. It's extremely complex, but if you look at your team composition before a match and decide where you fit in that comp, rather than doing the same thing every match, you will win much more often, even if you can't win your fights. If you aren't sure what roles your teammates are best suited to just by looking at their class, or what builds you can play if you prefer to play a certain role, you can check out the build list linked in the description and get an idea of the builds most people play. This will be updated with all the End of Dragons builds as well, so be sure to check it out. I can go on for days talking about rotations, build choices, and decision making, but I'll leave it at that. If you do want more in-depth content on Guild Wars 2 PvP, then consider subscribing to my channel, checking out the playlist there, which will also be linked below, and like this video if it helped you. And I will see you all next time.